Welcome, seekers of history, to a truly chilling journey into the shadowed mind of a ruthless tyrant. He conquered the entire mortal world, commanding countless millions with an iron and unforgiving fist. Yet, standing at the absolute and glorious pinnacle of power, he trembled before a silent, unseen foe. His demise approached, and so he tore the earth apart to forge a grand empire made of mercury and clay. This is the dark and tragic truth behind the glorious first emperor's descent into absolute, pure madness. The year is exactly 221 BC, and the devastating flames of war have finally been extinguished. Yin Zhang stands completely victorious over the 6 defeated states, claiming all under the vast heaven. He now declares himself Qin Shi Huang, the first radiant emperor to govern a unified China. Deep inside the magnificent Xiangyang Palace, cold black banners flutter in the silent, chilling wind. He proudly sits upon his massive golden throne, looking down at countless thousands of kneeling, trembling subjects. No mortal army can challenge his supreme authority, nor pierce his impenetrable and heavy iron armor. His word is absolute law, and a single command can effortlessly erase an entire ancient human city. Yet within the cavernous halls of his fortress, a profound and terrifying silence echoes incredibly loudly. As the proud emperor stares into the flickering torchlight, a dark realization slowly grips his heavy soul. He has conquered every visible horizon, but his own flesh remains fragile and inevitably bound to decay. Every passing night reminds him that time is the one relentless enemy his mighty armies cannot vanquish. The grander his magnificent empire becomes, the more the inevitable grip of the underworld terrifies him. He firmly refuses to surrender his hard-won universe to the cold and unforgiving shadow of eternal decay. Why should the supreme master of the living be forced to bow before the anonymous lords of the silent dead? A dangerous and obsessive seed is planted in his mind, the absolute desire for eternal, unending life. If the heavens will not willingly grant him immortality, he decides he will simply rip it from their grasp. The ruler begins to consult mysterious scholars, abandoning the solid logic of important state affairs. Whispers of legendary eastern islands where immortals dwell begin to entirely consume his daily thoughts. He gazes at the setting sun, entirely convinced that his divine reign must outlast the very stars above. Gold and jade suddenly lose all their luster compared to the desperate promise of a timeless, eternal breath. The great conqueror transforms into a terrified prisoner of his own magnificent, soaring, and boundless ambition. He orders the burning of useless books and silences the scholars who dare to question his divine and noble quest. Absolute power has birthed absolute paranoia, completely alienating him from his most trusted advisors. Even the sharpest bronze sword, the legendary Tai, feels entirely useless against the shadow of old age. His once incredibly sharp and commanding gaze now darts nervously at every minor and unexplained shadow. The emperor demands miracles from his terrified court, threatening terrible ruin for any miserable failure. If you held the entire world in your hands, would you abandon your compassion to live forever and ever? He begins to draft the most megalomaniacal architectural blueprint the ancient world has ever witnessed. If destiny dares to come for him, he will truly need an impenetrable fortress to rule the vast afterlife. Thus, the foundation of a dark and sorrow-laden legacy is quietly laid beneath the shadow of Mount Lishan. By 219 BC, the emperor's desperation morphs into a relentless and totally frantic hunt. He summons Shu Fu, a cryptic Taoist alchemist, claiming knowledge of the mystical and untamed eastern seas. Shu Fu speaks of Peng Lai, a hidden paradise where the elusive and powerful elixir of life can be harvested. The Emperor instantly grants him a massive fleet, fully loaded with the glorious Empire's most precious treasures. Thousands of innocent young boys and girls are tragically separated from their weeping and completely helpless mothers. They are offered as pure and noble tributes to appease the mythical sea monsters guarding the eternal cure. The massive wooden ships slowly vanish into the thick ocean fog, carrying away the Empire's fading hope. Meanwhile, back on the mainland, a dark nightmare of unimaginable proportions unfolds at Mount Lishan. Over 700,000 conscripted peasants and slaves are forcefully marched to the dark and daunting sight. The earth is violently ripped open as the desperate ruler commands the construction of his subterranean realm. They fiercely dig through solid rock and freezing mud, driven by the merciless whips of imperial royal guards. According to ancient historical records, the massive pit was dug so deeply it reached the underground springs. Molten copper is carefully poured to seal the foundations, creating a sturdy base for the sprawling, unseen city. The Emperor firmly demands an exact replica of his glorious earthly domain, entirely hidden in the dark. Palaces, pavilions, and towering administrative buildings are meticulously crafted beneath the cold soil. The sky of the Grand Tomb is adorned with glowing pearls and precious stones, perfectly mimicking the constellations. But the most terrifying feature is the intricate network of artificial rivers and sprawling, vast oceans. They are not filled with life-giving water, but with tons of incredibly heavy, toxic, and shimmering mercury. Mechanical systems are cleverly installed to make the silver liquid flow eternally around the silent tomb. The air within the cavern grows thick with poisonous fumes, silently overcoming the deeply exhausted workers. Every single stone block placed is terribly stained with the sweat and deep sorrow of a broken, nameless laborer. Food is scarce, the labor is brutal, and anyone who collapses is cast into the cold and unforgiving foundations. The Emperor does not care about the staggering human cost. He only deeply cares about his eternal safety. He eagerly visits the site, coughing from the dust, yet his eyes gleam with a manic and truly terrifying pride. He proudly imagines himself sitting on the subterranean throne, eternally commanding his ghostly subjects. But a grand ruler of the dead cannot be protected by mere walls. He needs an invincible, immortal army. Master craftsmen are strictly ordered to sculpt thousands of life-sized warriors from the coarse, reddish clay. Each soldier is given a highly unique and distinct face, modeled directly after the fierce veterans of Qin. Is the magnificent creation of such a masterpiece worth the agonizing destruction of countless human lives? As the silent clay army slowly materializes in the dark, the Emperor's own physical body begins to fail. Shufu has not returned, and the Emperor's fragile patience shatters into a violent, unpredictable rage. Desperate, he turns to the dark alchemists within his own palace, demanding immediate and magical results. They eagerly present him with glowing red pills, forged in blazing furnaces from cinnabar and heavy metals. These men falsely promise the toxic concoction will fortify his mortal shell and grant him divine longevity. Driven by absolute blind terror, the most powerful man in the world eagerly swallows the beautiful poison. Day by day, the deadly mercury and lead accumulate in his veins, entirely consuming his vital essence. His once majestic and commanding physical presence rapidly deteriorates into a frail and trembling shadow. His skin turns a sickly grayish pale, and deep dark circles permanently hollow out his incredibly weary eyes. Severe paranoia takes over his decaying mind, convincing him that shadowy betrayers lurk in every corner. He nervously changes his sleeping quarters every single night, wandering the vast empty palace like a ghost. Anyone who accidentally startles him or questions his erratic behavior is quickly silenced forever. The mercury entirely damages his nervous system, causing violent mood swings and agonizing sleepless nights. Meanwhile, at the underground necropolis, the horrifying scale of human tribute becomes utterly absolute. The massive Terracotta Army now stands in perfect, silent military formation, ready for eternal war. They are heavily armed with real, lethal bronze weapons, polished to a deadly shine in the suffocating dark. The brilliant master craftsmen are sealed within the eternal earth to protect its dark secrets forevermore. Anyone who possesses knowledge of the intricate layout of the traps is sealed within the eternal earth. As the heavy stone doors completely slam shut, the agonizing cries of the trapped fade into absolute nothing. The subterranean rivers of silver mercury continue to flow, reflecting a haunting, eternal, toxic light. Above the ground, the fading emperor decides to embark on one final and desperately planned inspection tour. He desperately hopes to find the mythical islands of the immortals before his fragile body completely gives out. His grand and majestic carriage rolls heavily across the eastern plains under the scorching, unforgiving summer sun. He fiercely clutches the dark red pills, swallowing them frantically as his breathing grows horribly shallow. The very medicine supposedly meant to save his life has completely and utterly shattered his mighty nervous system. Delusions constantly plague his mind. He dreams of giant sea monsters blocking his path to eternal youth. He fires a massive crossbow into the crashing ocean waves, fighting invisible demons born from his deepest fear. But absolutely no weapon forged by human hands can possibly defeat the undeniable and firm laws of nature. The brutal tyrant who conquered 6 mighty nations is now utterly and completely defeated by his own body. In the scorching summer of 210 BC, at Shakyu Palace, the great and mighty dragon falls. Qin Shi Huang breathes his last breath in a dark, lonely carriage, far away from his royal, majestic capital. Did the absolute ruler of the entire world truly believe he could cheat his fate and rule the earth forever? His sudden demise sends a massive shockwave of absolute and terrifying panic through his most trusted advisors. Chief Eunuch Zhao Gao and Prime Minister Li Si stare at the motionless, pale body in sheer and utter terror. They clearly know that if the news of his passing spreads, the newly forged and fragile empire will instantly collapse. Violent rebellions would ignite across the land, and their own political power would quickly be wiped out entirely. So these scheming men carefully devise one of the most brilliant and grotesque cover-ups in all of human history. They tightly seal the windows of the imperial carriage, keeping the fallen monarch hidden in the dark shadows. They secretly deliver food and read fake reports to the fallen ruler, carefully pretending he is still alive. But the intense summer heat drastically accelerates the tragic physical decay of his once mighty flesh. A sickening stench of inescapable ruin begins to seep out from the heavily guarded and mysterious royal wagon. To cleverly mask the foul smell, the cunning ministers order carts of decaying fish to surround the fallen king. What a truly poetic end for a man who desperately sought to elevate himself far above the mighty gods. The glorious emperor who conquered everything now travels through his domain concealed by the stench of decaying fish. They carefully forge a fake imperial edict, forcefully driving the rightful heir, Fusu, to end his tragic existence. A hopelessly weak and easily manipulated younger prince is placed upon the now unstable and highly dangerous throne. Only after returning safely to the capital do they finally announce the passing of the once great ruler. His decaying body is dressed in fine burial robes and carried to the dark and silent heart of Mount Lishan. Historical records claim his childless concubines were sealed within the eternal earth, completely alongside him. The massive bronze doors of the underworld slowly grind shut, perfectly sealing the tyrant in eternal darkness. He who desperately desired to conquer death has now become a permanent prisoner of his own giant tomb. Without his terrifying and iron grip, the brutal Qin dynasty collapses entirely within 3 very short years. Fire aggressively sweeps through the Zhanyang Palace, burning the symbols of his absolute power to the ground. Yet far beneath the smoldering ashes of the human world, his massive, ghostly empire remains entirely undisturbed. The rivers of Mercury continue to silently carve their way through the massive and profound underground landscape. And silently standing guard in the eternal blackness is the truly awe-inspiring and massive Terracotta Army. Over 8,000 clay soldiers, archers, and horses stand perfectly frozen in the incredibly cold and damp earth. They waited patiently in the darkness for over 2 millennia, silently guarding a long-forgotten tyrant. Until they were accidentally and miraculously found by simple farmers digging a well in 1974. Today, they firmly stand as a chilling testament to the terrifying intersection of grand vision and dark fear. Qin Shi Huang successfully achieved the absolute unity of China, standardizing weights, measures, and writing. But his insatiable hunger for total control turned his glorious dream into a living and breathing nightmare. He could easily conquer the entire world with brutal force, but he could never defeat his own fragility. His intense obsession with eternal life left behind a truly unparalleled wonder of the ancient world. Was he a brilliant visionary builder, or a fallen monster driven by blind terror? Share your thoughts down below. If you truly enjoyed this dark historical dive, please like the video, share it, and subscribe for more content.